Thank you, Chair Largo. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a City Planning Commission review session. Today is Monday, September 18th, and the time is 1:05. A quorum is present. The first item on the agenda for certification is a proposed site selection and acquisition in Brooklyn Community District 6. Our presenter is Catherine Ferreira of the Brooklyn office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The applicants, New York City Department of Environmental Protection and Department of Citywide Administrative Services, seek a combination site selection and acquisition of real property by the city in order to facilitate construction of the Gowanus Canal head-end combined sewer overflow reduction facility, a project to address longstanding contamination issues in a federally designated Superfund site. The project represents an upfront investment in critical infrastructure by the city, serving an area where the Department of City Planning is currently engaged in a neighborhood planning study. The project is located in the Gowanus neighborhood of Brooklyn's Community District 6. The properties proposed for site selection and acquisition are directly adjacent to the head end of the Gowanus Canal. The three properties total about 3.6 acres. The two northernmost lots are currently developed with 1- and 2-story buildings that contain electrical, plumbing, auto-related, and office uses. The third property to the south of DeGraw Street is developed with a 1-story building that's been repurposed into a film production studio. Some photographs of the proposed project site. These are views around the northeastern end of the site at the corner of Butler and Nevin Street. And along Nevin Street, the site's eastern edge. The two upper photos show a wall that partially encloses open storage on the site, and the two lower photos are along Nevin Street near the Thomas Green Playground. This is the southern portion of the site, including the building on the southernmost lot at 270 Nevin Street. And lastly, looking towards the site from across the Gowanus Canal. The surrounding area to the project site contains a mix of uses including commercial, light industrial, and residential. To the north and east of the proposed project site, non-conforming residential buildings are interspersed with manufacturing buildings, distribution and warehousing facilities, and commercial office spaces. There are 3 multi-building New York City Housing Authority complexes within about 2 to 4 blocks of the project site. Those are Wyckoff Gardens and Warren Street houses to the north and northeast, and Gowanus houses to the west. Residential uses to the south of the project site include a 4-story warehouse building that's been converted to a multifamily apartment building under provisions of the New York City loft law. DEP's Gowanus wastewater pumping station is located immediately to the northwest of the project site along Butler Street. That facility is part of the wastewater conveyance and treatment system that connects to the Red Hook wastewater treatment plant. And additionally, the Gowanus Canal flushing tunnel discharges into the canal directly across from the project site. The Thomas Green Playground, operated by Department of Parks and Recreation, is located east of the project site between Douglas and DeGraw Streets. It's an important neighborhood park. It includes an open space and a public pool. The project site's located within M21 zoning district with M12, R6, and R6B zoning mapped within about 1 to 2 blocks of the site. Recent rezonings in the area include nearby neighborhoods Park Slope, Carroll Gardens, and Borum Hill, which were rezoned in 2003, 2009, and 2011, respectively. Each of those rezonings generally established height limits on the side streets while allowing greater residential density in inappropriate areas. The proposed project is located within the Gowanus Places Neighborhood Study area. That study launched in October of 2016 in partnership with other city agencies, including DEP, as well as city council members Stephen Levin and Brad Lander. The study's building off of the neighborhood goals expressed during the Bridging Gowanus community visioning process, including a call for upfront infrastructure investment. And broadly, the study's purpose is to foster a thriving, working, more resilient Gowanus neighborhood. And a key component is coordinating city infrastructure improvements and other efforts to support the continued cleanup of the canal and to accommodate existing and future neighborhood needs. The study is currently in a stage of community outreach that began in early 2017. City agencies are engaging with Gowanus community members and organizations to gather feedback on a variety of topics before developing and sharing a preliminary planning and land use framework for the area. DEP has participated in this outreach process as a member of the Gowanus Studies Sustainability and Resiliency Working Group, and through public meetings throughout the process where they've discussed the ongoing need for CSO control in the area. The proposed CSO control facility would be developed to meet a federal requirement to reduce the volume of combined sewage overflows entering the Gowanus Canal. In March of 2010, the canal was designated a federal Superfund site under the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act of 1980, or CERCLA. The intent of that designation is to facilitate remediation of hazardous sediments that were deposited into the canal over the area's long industrial history, which included coal gasification plant pollution as well as combined sewer overflow. In June of 2016, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency issued a consent order directing the city to construct a CSO reduction facility at DEP's recommended location of 242 Nevin Street and 234 Butler Street. The third property to the south at 270 Nevin Street would be used temporarily for construction staging. As currently proposed, the facility would consist of an 8 million gallon below-ground tank and system that would provide an average 76% annual reduction of CSO volume discharged at this outfall location. Just a little bit about its operations. The figures here are diagrammatical at this point, but during wet weather events, flow would be conveyed by the gravity-fed combined sewer lines to the new facility, where it would first be screened for substantial solids. The combined sewage and stormwater would be detained in a storage tank and then filtered through a degridding system. After the rain event and drainage had occurred through the drainage system, the stored water would be pumped to the adjacent Gowanus wastewater pumping station for delivery to the Red Hook wastewater treatment plant, while solid waste left in the storage cells would be flushed to storage tanks to be trucked and disposed of off-site. While the overall site concept is preliminary and design's ongoing, it's currently proposed to include a 50-foot setback from the canal's bulkhead wall. DEP has committed to providing some form of public waterfront access in that space. The surface layout and any landscaping of open space on the site is currently being designed in coordination with Department of Parks and Recreation and other city agencies. It is a design priority among our agencies to connect any open space with the adjacent park where possible. Any public access areas or public amenities provided on the site will be determined through additional facility design outreach in continued coordination with the Gowanus Places Study public engagement efforts. A head house of approximately 25,700 square feet would house the facility's screening equipment, electrical equipment, odor control system, emergency generator, and crew areas. The above-grade structure, shown in the center here, would be located in the northern end of the site, and the facility would be largely automated, not require permanent staffing, although workers would have to access the facility, including underground equipment, to perform regular maintenance. This is another conceptual view from the southwest of the site, showing the setback from the canal and open space above the below-ground operations, and the head house massing in the northern corner. I should note that based on early feedback from other agencies and members of the community during scoping and the Gowanus Places study process, DEP is evaluating the feasibility of preserving elements of one of the buildings that's on the site now. That's a brick facade and terracotta signage on the Gowanus Water Supply Distribution Station building. It's located on the project site at the corner of Butler and Nevins. And additionally, there was a draft environmental impact statement issued for this project. DEP is the lead agency for environmental review, and potential adverse impacts were identified to archaeological and architectural resources and noise during the construction period. A final environmental impact statement is being prepared to further address impacts and mitigation measures. DEP and DCAS are requesting the site selection and acquisition of the 3 lots described in this application in order to construct a facility to substantially reduce combined sewer overflow in the Gowanus Canal. This action represents an important step by the city in canal remediation efforts and in coordinating community planning and infrastructure upgrades in Gowanus. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? I anticipated, Commissioner Dillows, that given your office's location, you might have a question or two.
I might have some thoughts on the 8 million gallon CSO tank down the street from my office. I'm just wondering how the alternative site that needs to be evaluated based on EPA's guidance under Thomas Green Park is being treated in the environmental review.
I believe that the alternative site, and just so that there's a little bit more background, the EPA has issued an order for this site to be constructed, if not on these sites, which is the city's preference by its technical review, on the adjacent Thomas Green Park property. And that will be reviewed, that environmental review will take place in full in the future if the deadlines for this site
So
are
it's not going to, so you're really going to do it separate, if that's required?
I wonder if it can be confirmed that that's the approach and that it's not reviewed in full in the EIS.
No, I think we'll talk to our colleagues and get you the right answer. So.
Okay, thanks. And if I may, one more. I'm just wondering if in the analysis, because I saw it was archaeological and then construction noise. I guess I'm just wondering if there's been thought to the potential likelihood of Nevin Street, at least at that location, being closed temporarily during the construction period, and what analysis that may include. So, I mean, I can just include that in the follow-up as well. That would be great. I'm happy we're here, let's put it that way.
I think many of us share your sentiment. Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Efron.
I just wanted to check, since there were some references to both odor and odor control, has the site been, or has the odor control been maximized to have it away from the pool and the park?
The design for that element of control is ongoing, and it will certainly be directed to the extent necessary in terms of any ventilation. The scale of the ventilation is still being determined. And we'll follow up on that when they have issued a further level of environmental analysis.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, I'm curious to know about the timetable for construction. I gather this is likely to take quite a bit of time to unfold. Cost, how it's getting funded, I know those are beyond our purview, but this is a large, important piece of public infrastructure. It'd be good to understand a little bit more about. And then finally, I'm curious to know, you mentioned the neighborhood study work that's going on and indicated that DEP has been part of those conversations, but is this a facility that neighborhood planning group has embraced? Or do we have some ragged issues surrounding the location of this in the midst of the study area?
I've been a part of the Gowanus neighborhood planning study, and I would say that generally there's a great understanding of the necessity of this facility, and members of the community looking forward to learning more about it and to being part of further discussions in terms of any open space or facilities design.
Okay. Is there anything you can say now about timetable and cost?
Yeah, the timetable, the length of construction is approximately 7 years. So we're looking at a completion of about 2028 in terms of once it gets started after acquisition and further design, et cetera.
And budget? Do we know?
I'll have to get back to you on
Okay.
that in terms of the source. It is a city project.
And could I ask one more question? You mentioned the southernmost building having been recently repurposed to a film production studio. Any issues surrounding their relocation? Do we know where they're going to go? Is that part of the plan? Is it being worked on?
The city is currently, through EDC, engaged in discussions with that business for relocation.
Okay. Well, I'll be curious to hear more as we get to the public review feedback. Thank you.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. The report indicates that the city is going to pursue an acquisition or a lease for these private properties. So do you have a sense of which avenue is being, has a preference at this point? I would assume acquisition, but
Yeah, the
tell me.
city's, the DEP is still, and DCAS are still reviewing all options, but most likely you'd be looking at acquisition, at least for the two northern sites where the facilities would have to be located permanently.
Would you characterize those negotiations as substantially along, or
I
in the
really can't
beginning,
say.
or
I can have-
where?
I can have DEP report, give us updates on that, but I have not been engaged in them.
Thank you.
The one thing that I would note is that there are 3 parcels. The first 2 will be permanently used. The third is for construction staging. Other questions? Okay, then this application is certified. Thank you.
Item number 2, page 25 for certification, a special permit in Manhattan Community District 8. And giving his first presentation before the City Planning Commission is Joseph Hennekins of the Manhattan office.
Good afternoon. So 172, 174 East 73rd Street is a 3-story historic landmark carriage home located on the Upper East Side of Manhattan in Community District 8. The applicant, 17274 East LLC, who is also the owner, proposes to renovate and enlarge the building into a 2-unit residence. To facilitate the enlargement, the applicant requests that the City Planning Commission grant a special permit to waive rear setback regulations. So, the project site is located on the south side of East 73rd Street, right there, between 3rd Avenue to the east and Lexington Avenue to the west. The site is zoned R8B, which is a contextual zoning district typical for mid-blocks in the surrounding area. R8B districts allow an FAR of 4.0 and a maximum building height of 75 feet with front setbacks. The surrounding avenues are zoned C18X, which is a commercial district equivalent to R9X contextual district, and C19, which is a commercial district equivalent to an R10 district. The project site abuts an R10A commercial district on the south side at the rear lot line, which allows taller buildings along East 72nd Street. The existing building is a 3-story Romanesque Revival carriage house built in 1889. It is one of a number of similar carriage houses built on the Upper East Side in the late 19th century to serve as Fifth Avenue mansions. Today, 13 similar carriage homes exist on this one block. 12 of them have been converted into residences, and 1 is still used as a commercial garage. 172, 174 is a contributing property of the National Register of Historic Places East 73rd Street Historic District, and it's located just outside the bounds of LPC's Upper East Side Historic District. The surrounding area contains a mix of building uses and forms, as you can see. The site right there. In general, the mid-blocks are characterized by brownstones and row houses. And the avenues have taller pre- and post-war apartment buildings, some with ground floor commercial use. Central Park is located just to the west of the project site, and the area is well served by transit, including the Q, the 456, and multiple bus routes. In addition, there are a number of private and public secondary high schools in the area, and Marymount Manhattan College, about 1 block to the south. The exterior of the building, and really of the entire block, as you can see, has changed very little over the years. However, the use of the building has transitioned a number of times. First from a carriage house to a garage when automobiles replaced carriages in the early 20th century, and then in the 1960s into a photography studio with residences above. More recently, the building housed a therapist's office on the first floor with residences above, and currently it's vacant, awaiting renovation. The rear of the building is currently non-compliant with bulk regulations that require a 30-foot rear setback in R8 districts. Right now, the majority of the building, the first and second floors, encroach 24 feet into the rear setback. The exception is a small 1-story shed, which you can see sort of here, which encroaches directly to the rear lot line. The property has a 25-foot street frontage along East 73rd Street, and the lot is about 102 feet deep. The applicant proposes to renovate and enlarge the existing building to create 2 residential units. The most significant changes would be an extension of the existing 3rd floor towards the rear of the lot, and the construction of a new 4th floor and bulkhead. In addition, the building's exterior would be renovated, a new cellar excavated, and the small 1-story shed extension at the rear of the property would be removed. And this is the 30-foot lot line, and these are the areas that are non-complying. existing in Speckle and new in Hatch. This is an illustrative and conceptual diagram, but it shows the new bulk on the 3rd floor, the 4th floor, and the bulkhead. And in these renderings, you can see that this is a similar action that has been completed by a number of nearby carriage homes. The proposed expansion would rise to 54 feet 5 inches with bulkhead. However, the 4th floor and the bulkhead would be set back 15 feet from the front of the building, so as not to be visible from the street. Current bulk regulations require properties in R8 districts to have a rear setback of at least 30 feet. The proposed new 3rd floor enlargement would encroach 14 feet into the required rear yard, and the proposed 4th floor addition would encroach 9 feet. With the removal of the shed, the 1st and the 2nd floors would encroach 24 feet into the required rear yard. This means all floors of the building would be non-compliant with rear setbacks, although as you can see, a number of the buildings on the block are non-compliant as well. In addition to non-compliance with rear yard requirements, the applicant's proposal would also be non-compliant with regulations that require windows to be 30 feet from the rear lot line. The speckle here shows the existing non-compliant area, and then the hatch, again, is the new non-compliant. So as a historic landmark property, the applicant requests a special permit to waive rear setback regulations for yards and windows. The applicant has secured approval from the Landmark Preservation Commission for the addition and established an agreement for the continued maintenance of the project, both of which are conditions for a 74-711 special permit. Approval of the actions will facilitate the renovation and enlargement of this historic carriage home into 2 residential units.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. Congratulations on your first presentation. I'm wondering if the non-compliant buildings nearby, because there are several streets,
Right.
including a little farther east, 73rd, 74th Street with carriage houses, if those are, those have received approval from either BSA or city planning, or they were just non-compliant and somehow under the radar, only because I'm trying to figure out if this is the end of a trend or the beginning of a trend.
I'll have to get back to you about that for sure. I think, though, this is a number of buildings have sort of popped the top, so to speak, but I think in general, no one is proposing to move the non-compliant rear yard any further back. It's just a matter of introducing new non-compliant area on the
Yeah,
top.
it's actually more about the height, I think,
Okay.
from the street experience of a historic neighborhood.
Other questions? A question for me. Will the additional stories be visible from the street?
No, well not, yeah. There's a 15-foot front setback, which is to make them not visible from the front of the street.
No, of course.
Will they be visible from the other taller buildings in the neighborhood? Yeah,
Of course.
right, yeah, okay,
No, almost by definition.
yes.
Other questions? Okay, then this application is certified, and I don't want the commission to be lulled by the fact that we have only 2 certifications today. We will have many more coming at our next review session.
The next item is number 3, page 71, our first pre-hearing item, a zoning map amendment, zoning text amendments, and a special permit in Harlem, Manhattan Community District 11. Our presenter is Edwin Marshall from the Manhattan office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The applicant, the National Black Theater, is seeking several discretionary approvals to develop a new mixed-use building which would have affordable housing, mixed-income housing, including units to be provided through MIH, a retail space, and new performance space for the National Black Theater. The project site is located at 2031 to 2033 Fifth Avenue within Manhattan Community District 11. The project site is located on the east side of Fifth Avenue between 125th Street and 126th Street. This is Fifth Avenue right here. The project site comprises 2 buildings. This is the performance venue for the National Black Theater. It has about 26,000 square feet, 27,000 square feet. And then there's a 3-story commercial building which has about 37,000 square feet of floor area. In total, the National Black Theater complex has about 63,000 and change square feet of floor area, and the commission can see the existing built context of the surrounding neighborhood. The National Black Theater site is located within the special 125th Street district and is located within a C448 district. C448 districts allow residential, commercial, and community facility uses up to 4 FAR within a contextual building envelope where the building can rise to a maximum height of 85 feet. The proposed build program, again, is a mixed use building. It has 240 residential units. Approximately 72 units would be made affordable through MIH, approximately 23,000 square feet of retail space, and approximately 27,000 square feet of performance space, which is about the same as what it currently exists right now. The requested actions are a zoning map change, a zoning max amendment from a C44A to a C47. C47 allows residential development up to a 9 FAR bonusable to 12, either through the arts bonus or through MIH. The maximum building height within the special 125th Street district for C47 districts is 195 feet. The 195 feet would constrain this project's ability to accommodate the volume, the space needed for the theater, performance space, as well as the MIH units. So the applicant is seeking a zoning text change to provide additional flexibility in terms of the building envelope. There are several zoning text amendments to the special 125th Street district that are being requested by the applicant. One is to allow the entrance of the performance venue to be placed 100 feet north of 125th Street. Under the special district regulations, performance venue entrances are only allowed on 125th Street. For this particular building, the performance venue entrance will be on 5th Avenue at a point approximately maybe 150 feet north of 125th Street. So this text amendment will allow the entrance to be placed in the desired location. Second would be to create a special sub-district to allow a building height, a maximum building height of 245 feet. Again, as I said in my previous remarks, in the C47 district, the maximum building height is 195 feet. So allowing additional building height will enable the applicant to accommodate both the MIH as well as the volume required for the performance space. And additionally, it modifies the glazing and transparency requirements along the Fifth Avenue frontage. At certification, the commission raised very strong concerns about the modification of the glazing requirements. We have communicated that to the applicant since certification. They are working with their architect on a solution, but we believe they're going to withdraw that request. So we're very, very, heartened by that. And they'll speak to that at the public hearing tomorrow. This image shows the proposed sub-district A. The sub-district A is outlined in the red. It encompasses the entire project site, again, which has about 16,000 square feet of lot area. And again, this would enable the proposed building to achieve its maximum building height and overall development objective. Additionally, the applicant requests approval of the mapping of an MIH area for the project site. This will provide affordable housing through MIH, and the applicant is seeking to use option 1 and option 2. And a special permit. As the commission is aware, units generated through MIH do not require parking. However, there's 168 market rate units that would require parking. Under the C47 regulations, with a 40% parking requirement, 72 units would require parking. Because this is within a transit zone and at least 20% of the units are income restricted, the applicant can apply for a special permit under 74-533. And this would enable the applicant to waive the 72 parking spaces. And this is generally required because the lot is it's a small lot. It's 85 feet wide, it's 200 feet in length. However, it would be extremely expensive to put parking on several levels below grade on this parking height, this project site, hence the request of the special permit. In terms of the public review, these applications were certified and referred on June 5th. Manhattan Community Board 11 on August 9th by a vote of 30 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining, voted to approve these applications without conditions. On September 13th, the borough president recommended approval of these applications without conditions, and we forwarded a copy of a recommendation to you in your Friday package. This last image shows the National Black Theater's sort of rendering. You can see we're standing at 125th Street, looking north on 5th Avenue. You can see within the base, the retail space, the theater, which is the double height ceilings here. This is the second and third floor. And above that, you can see the residential units to be placed above that. And the performance venue entrance is placed here on Fifth Avenue at a distance that's roughly maybe 150 feet north of 125th Street.
Questions from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Knight.
I had asked this at certification, but I'd like the applicant to speak to where the retail is contemplated and how it relates to the entrance of the theater.
Commissioner Delauze.
Edwin, remind me, is this the first time that 74-533 is used to waive parking spaces for market rate units?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and is there a maximum number of parking spaces that can be waived under that?
Well, in the environmental analysis, it reviewed up to 77 spaces. So within the scope of the environmental review, what's allowed for these actions, they can waive up to 77.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes, Edwin, I'm certainly happy to hear about the development with respect to the glazing. I think that will, maintaining good streetscape both along 125th Street and Fifth Avenue is, I think, something we have, as planners, have to keep our eye on. And this sounds like a step in the right direction. Does the cultural component, in order to achieve the bonus, have to be located at any particular place in the building?
It has to be located below the lowest occupied or residential floor. So it can be placed, above grade as well as below the lowest occupiable residential floor. But also, the arts bonus is unique, and 125th Street is unique in that the cultural space, the performance space can be placed below grade. It can be placed in the cellar and basement as well. Okay. And that can generate bonus floor area also. That makes it
Even though it's
unique.
below grade and doesn't count as floor area, it will still
It can generate the bonus, that's right.
Okay.
And it has to be planned not as an afterthought. There are requirements in terms of floor heights, clear span views, access, egress, things of that nature.
Good, okay. I'll be interested in hearing more about that at the public hearing. Of course, we recognize the strong support this project has received from the community, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that this is really just a rezoning and a text amendment, and we don't really know very much about the programming or the commitment to the role of the National Black Theater in the project. A lot can change as projects go through planning and financing, and we could be dealing with a very different set of circumstances once the building actually gets built. So I think we have to think carefully about how the cultural use is going to fit into this project and be confident that it meets the aspirations of the community. Thank you.
Commissioner Ephron.
I do have a question about the entrance and exit, more importantly, on Fifth Avenue. And are there any other commercial uses along Fifth Avenue over there, or will that be an issue in the evening, depending on the capacity of the theater, for those exiting to create some sort of a noise nuisance?
To go back. Okay. So along this stretch of Fifth Avenue, you do have commercial uses. This was an Applebee's restaurant, so
Okay, that's fine.
So you do. It's no longer in operation, but but you do have commercial use. And then on the ground, on these ground floor, these brownstones, you have ground floor.
I did look on that map, and I didn't see any C, but now that I know what that corner is, that is helpful, and thank you for answering.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, this will go to a public hearing tomorrow, the 19th of September.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the Bronx. Our next pre-hearing item is item number 4, page 112, a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendments in Bronx Community District 9 in Soundview. Our presenter is Juton Horseman of the Bronx office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this is an application by Park Lane Residences. The proposed development would create a total of 425 affordable residential units in 2 14-story buildings and would have approximately 20,000 square feet of ground floor commercial uses. To facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is requesting a rezoning, and MIH text amendment, or MA. The project site is located in Bronx Community District 9 in the Soundview neighborhood. The project site is currently located in an R6 zoning district, which allows mid-density residential. The area is a mix of retail, residential, and community facility uses. Immediately north of the site is the Bruckner Plaza Shopping Center, a large strip mall shopping center with about 1,500 surface parking spaces. There's some additional retail just to the west of the shopping center here. East of Pugsley Avenue are 1 and 2 family detached neighborhood. There are a number of large apartment buildings to the northeast, northwest, west, and southwest, including Stevenson Commons located here, which is a 21-story, 955-unit mixed-use development. The Park Lane apartment block is a single zoning lot, which currently contains the Park Lane apartment building in the project area here. This is a 21-story, 352-unit Mitchell-Lama building. The building was disposed of by the city in 1967 and built in 1971 with a 50-year deed restriction for the Mitchell-Lama development that is set to expire in 2021. It should be noted that as a benefit to the proposed development, HPD would be able to extend the long-term affordability of the existing Mitchell-Lama building. The applicant is currently in negotiations with HPD on the lease renewal. The site is bounded by Lafayette to the south, Pugsley Avenue to the east, White Plains Road to the west, which are all wide streets, and Turnbull Avenue just to the north, which is a narrow street. The entire block of the project area is a single zoning lot. In order to facilitate the project, the applicant is proposing the current R6 be rezoned to R8 over the portion of the site which would create over the existing building and the proposed development. The current R6 zoning district is using nearly the entire development potential for the existing building. The R8 permits an FAR of up to 7.2 and was chosen as it allows the existing building to conform with zoning and provides enough development potential for the proposed building. The applicant is also seeking a C24 commercial overlay for the ground floor commercial uses. The applicant is also seeking a text amendment to create a mandatory inclusionary housing area over the R8 portion of the zoning lot. The proposed buildings would be 100% affordable, with the applicant seeking MIH options 1 and 2. Option 1 requires 25% at 60% or below AMI, which would create 107 units of permanently affordable housing. Option 2 would be 30% or below at 80% AMI, which would create 128 units of permanently affordable housing. The AMI levels of the proposal would range from 30% to 100% AMI. The proposed development would be located on the western portion of the zoning lot, where there is an existing 79-space parking lot and basketball court. The development would contain two 14-story buildings. The affordable family building, which has the blue outline here, would contain 292 units and approximately the 20,000 square feet of ground floor commercial use. It'd be accessed by Lafayette, White Plains, and Turnbull Avenue. The affordable senior building in the red outline here would contain 133 units and front Turnbull Avenue. These two buildings would connect in the basement where there would be a 67-space parking garage. The site is further reconfigured to provide 42 surface parking spaces between the existing building and the proposed building. To the further to the east, there's currently 122 parking spaces. It'll be reconfigured to accommodate 159 parking spaces. In total, the site would provide 269 parking spaces, up from the current 248 parking spaces. It would also contain approximately 114,000 square feet of open space. Both buildings in the proposed development will be 14 stories, where they sit at an approximately 100-foot high, 10-story base, before setting back 10 feet on Lafayette and White Plains, which are wide streets, and 15 feet on Turnbull, and then stepping up to the 14 feet or 138 feet. And then here is another cross-section which shows the neighboring Park Lane building, which was the 21-story for context. So on August 7th, the Community Board 9 Land Use Committee voted in favor of the application with the following conditions: to extend the Mitchell-Lama affordability of the existing building, making repairs and improvements to the existing building and common areas, developing a program for youth in the existing building, beautifying and maintaining green spaces of local streets, providing seniors preference to new buildings with programming, working with local nonprofits to ensure construction workforce is for the local community, creating high-quality jobs that would pay union wages and benefits, and contributing money to nearby school to assist with programs. The applicant responded with a letter stating that they would work with HPD to extend the affordability of the existing Michelama building. They would make the necessary repairs, improvements, and upgrades to the existing building and address any violations in the existing building, and working with Park Lane Association and Community Board 9 to address any concerns over the existing building or any that occurred during the construction of the new building. And they're committed to working with local nonprofits to ensure the general contractor will employ workers from the local community as well. The borough president gave a conditional approval stating that there should be more 2- and 3-bedroom units and a significant reduction of studio units in the family building. The BP noted that 67% of the total units are studios and 1-bedrooms for a building that's identified as a family building. He would like to see at least 40% of the units dedicated to 2- and 3-bedroom units and an increase of these unit sizes, and at least 10% of them being 3-bedroom units. The BP noted that the reason for the increased sizes is to accommodate families. There needs to be more 2- and 3-bedrooms, and the unit size needs to be large enough to accommodate those families. The BP did also note general support for the project and the rezoning to accommodate it, and the commitment of the applicant to maintaining the affordability of the existing building. So in conclusion, the proposed development would create 425 affordable residential units in the 2 14-story buildings and would have approximately 20,000 square feet of ground floor commercial uses.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner De La Hoz.
I'm just wondering, the community board's vote came back with 8 people voting. Is that quorum?
It was not. They voted at their land use committee, and then they had their summer recess. So they said that they're going to send in a formal recommendation after the summer, so it'll be next month. But they understood the process and tried to get the recommendation ahead of time.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Marin.
Jatan, nice to see you. Do we know if the applicant is amenable to increasing the number of 2- and 3-bedroom units in the building?
So we got the recommendation late last week, and I think that's something that the applicant will need to respond to tomorrow, public hearing. Haven't heard from them yet.
Also, there's the community board had some other modifications and conditions which weren't addressed in the letter. Do you know if the applicant's prepared to address those as well?
They will need to, yeah.
Other questions? Okay, this item will go to a public hearing tomorrow, the 19th.
Thank you.
Our next pre-hearing item is number 5 on the agenda, page 136, a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendments and special permit in Bronx Community District 11. Our presenter is Michael Cavalar from the Bronx office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is for a project at 7076 Eastchester. And just to remind you of the details of the project, this is to facilitate 182 units of nonprofit hospital staff dwelling that would be used by Montefiore Hospital located near the project. The project was certified on June 5th and includes 3 actions: a zoning map amendment, a zoning text amendment, and a special permit to facilitate the facility itself, and I'll get into detail on those in just a moment. Project is located in Bronx Community District 11 in the Northeast Bronx. It's part of the Hutchinson Metro Center, which is a large, nearly 2 million square feet commercial center. In the northern portion of the center, notably, is the Public Safety Answering Center, which was recently completed. Southern portion, the Bronx Psychiatric Center, which has been consolidated. And then there's a number of commercial uses within the center itself, including proposal for an additional 1.5 to 2 million square feet. Notably across the railroad right-of-way, which is shown in blue, there are a number of medical campuses, including the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Montefiore, and Yeshiva. And then to the south, there's some large rail yards and other industrial uses there. The project site itself is located immediately adjacent to the Amtrak right-of-way. The property circled in blue is the subject of development, but just to go quickly over the other site portions of the site, on the southern portion here, or the easternmost portion, the bottom of the screen, is the Hutchinson Metro Center. This is a 350,000 square foot commercial retail and hotel uses in this area. There's 3 floors of Class A office space, There's a Marriott hotel, LA Fitness, and some other uses as well. On the right of the screen is an existing 3-story parking garage. And then again, along the railroad right-of-way, along Bassett, which is an access road, not a mapped road itself, is an existing 5-story parking garage on which the applicant proposes to build the 7 additional stories that would be 182 units of nonprofit hospital staff dwelling. Just to remind the commission, this is the design for the project. So on the bottom, we can see the existing 5-story parking garage with the additional 7-story structure built on top. Quick reminder of the surrounding area. On the top left-hand section is a view looking down Bassett. Again, the access road, this is looking to the north. Across the way, you can see the 28-story towers that are part of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. These are residences. And then you can also see the catenary there from the Amtrak. Notably, I'm just going to go back 1 minute, apologize. Located on this corner is roughly the location of the proposed Metro North station that would be part of the Hutchinson Metro Center there. And so on the upper right-hand corner here, we can see the existing Marriott Hotel with the office space, Applebee's, and some other uses in there. On the bottom right-hand corner is looking again down the access road down Bassett Avenue toward Calvary Hospital. Again, the railroad is on the right there. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the existing 5-story parking garage on which the nonprofit hospital staff dwelling units would be built. So there are 3 changes that were requested to facilitate this. The first is a zoning map change. The zoning map change would map what is currently an M11 district for the entirety of the project area to a C42 for the portion of the project on which the nonprofit hospital staff dwelling units would be built. C42A at the confluence here of Waters Place in Eastchester, and then a R5 district just to the east of Marconi Place. I would just remind the commission that this small sliver of a rezoning is an artifact. In 2011, Marconi Street was mapped to provide access up to the Public Safety Answering Center, and as a result, a small portion of M11 was left to the east of Marconi Street, and so the R55 would be mapped to rationalize that zoning and bring it back into line with the zoning on the other portion, that area. The second action requested is a text amendment. The first portion of which is mapping in mandatory inclusionary housing, options 1 and 2 in this case. I will note that as a community facility use, there would be no requirement for mandatory inclusionary housing in the nonprofit hospital staff dwelling units themselves, but any future projects in the C42, C42A districts would themselves be required to comply. The second portion of this relates to modifications to the conditions for allowing nonprofit hospital staff dwellings. As it currently exists, those dwellings must be within 1,500 feet of every portion of the zoning lot. I apologize, I'll rephrase that. Every portion of the zoning lot on which those dwelling units are built must be within 1,500 feet of the hospital they're to serve. Given the very large nature of the zoning lot, which includes all the way north up to the Public Safety Answering Center, that simply wouldn't qualify despite being within 500 feet of the hospital itself. And then finally, special permit with including the modified conditions pursuant to the zoning text amendment to section 7470. I would just remind the commission there was a question related to the number of parking spaces provided and the utilization rate. The applicant did provide an answer which is didn't have the utilization rate, but he noted that at any given time there's some 125 to 175 available parking spaces in the parking garage in which the units would be built are to be built. There are also some 1,014 parking spaces within the project area itself, the lot. And so Community Board 11 voted on August 14th. They approved with conditions, the condition being that the zoning map amendment apply only to the C42 portion of the site and not to the areas that would be mapped to the R5 and the C42A. The Bronx Borough President approved based on 2 conditions. He noted the importance of the medical field in the Bronx and the growth, and he also noted the importance of the forthcoming Bronx Metro North station as part of the Bronx Metro North line that will include the 4 stations in the Bronx. So, and just a reminder of the one more rendering of the project there. So.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Marin.
Mike, good afternoon. So the image on the left, or the building on the left, that's the existing hotel,
That's right.
and the new building is to the right. So what is this connection piece in between the two? Is that a connection to the 2 parking lots? Is that correct? To the parking garages?
No, I think this is just an unfortunate condition of the
Axonometric,
rendering.
then.
That they're
Oh, I
not
see.
actually connected, but
Got
the
it.
angle makes
Got
it
it.
appear as though
Thank
they
you.
are. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Efron.
I just hope the applicant will speak to how they will keep internal controls over making sure, in fact, doctors and staff are the residents in those buildings, since it will become an even more desirable location given the Metro North station.
Yeah, I'll make sure they're aware of the question. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
And I hope they can also give us just a little bit more context about the population that they feel responsible for housing and why it's difficult in this neighborhood. Is this something that's changing in the nature of hospital work? Is it something that's changing in the nature of that neighborhood? Just to understand the picture a little bit better. And then also how this is at some distance from the hospital, as you pointed out, and you have to cross a railroad track to get to work. And how are folks going to get back and forth between the hospital and their dwellings, this being the only residential? I mean, I know it's not-for-profit, it's community facility use, but it's people living. And how is this little island of residential use going to feel as a place to live?
So I can briefly respond to both of those questions, but I'll also communicate to the applicant team. So related to the first question, Montefiore itself notes that they currently have about 100 nonprofit hospital staff dwellings. They see it as a competitive advantage over other schools, that their residents can live in these facilities nearby. They feel they have demand for about 350 a year, and so this would help to meet that demand. The second question, currently there is access, still within 1,500 feet walking distance, going down towards Water and then over up East Chester. However, it's also notable that Metro North is committed to providing some sort of pedestrian crossing as part of the proposed Hutchinson Metro station, Morris Park station, that would be bridging the rail line right there at Morris Park Avenue.
Other questions? Okay, then this will go to a public hearing on Tuesday, the 19th.
Thank you.
All right, our final pre-hearing item is item number 6 on page 173, zoning map and zoning text amendments, special permits, and disposition of city-owned property in Brooklyn Community District 9. Our presenter is Kevin Kraft of the Brooklyn office.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the New York City Economic Development Corporation and the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services for a zoning map amendment, a zoning text amendment, a special permit to create a large-scale general development, a special permit for a reduction of required accessory parking, and the disposition of city-owned property. These actions would facilitate the adaptive reuse and redevelopment of the existing Bedford Union Armory into a 3-building, 496,000 square foot mixed-use development, including a state-of-the-art community recreational facility open to the public, commercial nonprofit office space, including a community flex room, and 390 total residential units, including 177 affordable units, of which 122 would be permanently affordable. The development site is located at 1555 Bedford Avenue in the Crown Heights neighborhood of Community District 9. As a reminder, the site is currently within an R6 zoning district and occupies the majority of the block bounded by Bedford and Rogers Avenues and President and Union Streets. The area is extremely well served by public transit and is located in a transit zone with the 2, 3, 4, 5 subway lines and the Franklin Avenue shuttle, all within a few blocks of the development site, along with numerous bus lines running along Franklin, Bedford, and Rogers Avenues. Currently, the development site contains approximately 122,000 square feet of lot area, with frontages along Bedford Avenue considered a wide street and President and Union Streets both considered narrow. The site is improved with the existing 171,000 square foot vacant armory, which has 4 components: the drill shed, the 3-story head house formerly used by the military for administrative spaces, the 2-story stable building previously used for various military functions, and a 30-foot tall maintenance garage structure. These images show the currently the head house and the drill shed looking from Bedford Avenue, as long as looking down Union Street at the drill shed. This shows the current stables on President Street, as well as the maintenance garage on President Street, and the context of Rogers Avenue with the armory in the background, and the maintenance garage fronting Union Street. The applicant is proposing to adaptively reuse and retain the existing drill shed and head house portions of the armory and turning that into a recreational and community facility and construct 2 new residential buildings for a combined total of 390 dwelling units. Building 1, consisting of the existing drill shed and head house, are proposed to be repurposed into an approximately 108,000 square foot community recreational facility and recreational center. Building 1 would contain an 83,000 square foot community recreational facility, which would include 3 full-size basketball courts, multi-sport courts, a turf field used for soccer and tennis, a 6-lane, 25-meter indoor swimming pool, fitness area, community flex room, associated administrative and support uses, as well as 25,000 square feet of subsidized commercial space offered to nonprofit organizations and educational institutions. The recreation and community facility space would be managed by the Brooklyn-based nonprofit CAMBA. The applicants have also engaged with over a dozen local nonprofits and social service organizations that have signed letters of intent to occupy the office space. Here you can see the proposed floor plan of the recreational center with the office space fronting Bedford Avenue, the community flex room on the corner of President Street and Bedford Ave, as well as the multi-sport courts and basketball courts, tennis courts and soccer field, and the swimming pool along with fitness areas down here. This is what currently the drill shed looks like, the vacant drill shed. Building 2, the existing stable structure, is proposed to be demolished to facilitate the development of a 6-story residential building containing 60 home ownership units, 20% designated as affordable home ownership units. Building 3, the existing parking structure, is proposed to be demolished to allow for the development of a new mixed-use residential and community facility building. The proposed building would be 16 stories tall and rise to a maximum building height of 180 feet. The building's first floor would be comprised of community facility space. Floors 2 through 16 would contain approximately 330 dwelling units. 50% are proposed to be income-restricted affordable housing. Approximately 122 of said units would be permanently affordable pursuant to the city's MIH Option 2 requirements. All remaining affordable units would be at 110% AMI and subject to a 30-year regulatory agreement with the city. In addition, a 118-space parking garage accessory to the residential floor area would be located below grade of Building 3 and accessed via a curb cut on President Street, located down here. In order to facilitate the proposed project, the applicants are proposing 5 actions. First, a zoning map change from the existing R6 zoning district to an R72 and an R72 C24 district. Second, the applicants are proposing to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area coterminous with the development site, selecting MIH Option 2, which requires 30% of units at an average of 80% AMI. Additionally, due to the unique circumstances created by preserving the existing armory's drill shed and head house, the applicants are seeking a special permit to facilitate a large-scale general development, seeking a number of bulk waivers. The 6 waivers being requested under the proposed large-scale would allow the selected developer to create a superior development that shifts the bulk of the residential component to the existing garage and stable locations, shown here and here. Additionally, the applicants are requesting a special permit for a reduction of parking requirements for accessory group parking facilities. The applicants are proposing to provide 118 accessory off-street parking spaces out of the 129 required. In addition, a disposition of city-owned property is being requested. Approximately 15,000 square feet of the development site would be sold to the selected developer to facilitate the development of home ownership units. The remainder of the development site would be disposed of through a long-term ground lease between the city and the selected developer. The Deputy Mayor for Housing and Economic Development is the lead agency for the environmental review and released a notice of completion for the draft EIS on May 19, 2017. The draft EIS identified adverse impacts related to historic and cultural resources, transportation traffic, as well as construction traffic. On June 19th, 2017, Community Board 9 held a public hearing, and on June 27th, Community Board 9 voted to disapprove with modifications, 0 in favor, 35 against, and 1 abstaining. Community Board 9 recommended developing the Armory as a standalone project separate from any housing, and to the extent that the project needs a housing component, developing it as 100% affordable. Additionally, the board recommended enhancing the commercial and recreational aspects of the proposal, targeting the Armory programs to seniors and youth, landmarking the building, and evaluating a local university professor's alternative proposal, which is unclear if this was provided to the applicant at this time. On July 10th, the Brooklyn Borough President held a public hearing on the proposed application. The applicant did not have the opportunity to present, and no speakers had the opportunity to testify because the hearing was closed as a public safety precaution due to protests. On September 1st, the Borough President submitted a letter disapproving the project with modifications. The Borough President's recommendations specify that the city retain ownership of the site to eliminate the proposed condos and to maximize affordable housing units. Additionally, the Borough President has requested that the applicants provide greater detail regarding the logistics of the development, including construction cost, multiple assumptions of the number of units, and variations of affordable housing that might assist with covering the operating costs, and to coordinate with the Department of Transportation to implement curb extensions, as well as exploring additional resiliency and sustainability measures in the development. Thank you.
Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Cantor.
Have they discussed phasing of this job in terms of how many years it will work?
I believe the construction would be completed around 2021.
2021. When will the activities in the Armory be reinstated?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
When will the Armory component be done?
That would be the Armory, the community facility space would be completed first, followed by the housing a few months later.
So the end of the housing is approximately
2021. It would be a few months behind the community recreational space.
recreational activity will be early.
From what they've provided us the information, yes.
Are they willing to bind themselves to a phasing?
That's something I can have them address tomorrow, and I can relay that to them.
Other questions? Commissioner Deleuze.
So given the controversy of the project, can you help us imagine what tomorrow's going to be like a bit?
Throughout most of their public events, they've had about 200 people come out, 50 speakers at some of the scoping meetings. This has been a hot button issue for the community, but I think there's also value in what this project's bringing to the community as well. So it's good to hear both sides. However, I'm expecting a big crowd.
And I'll note, now that all of the commissioners are here, and we'll reach out to Commissioner Ortiz, that the hearing is going to be at 1 Center Street again, which we thought worked quite well for when we anticipate a large crowd. 9 a.m. And 9 a.m. Set your alarm clocks back a half hour. Good advice. Other questions? Okay, then this will go to a public hearing tomorrow, the 19th of September. Great.
Item number 7 is a city council modification regarding the East 126th Street Bus Depot. Edwin Marshall is here to present.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. This is a City Council mod for the 125th Street bus depot. On July 26th, the Commission approved zoning map, city map, and zoning text amendments and disposition of city-owned property to facilitate this project. Just to familiarize the Commission, just briefly, the project site is located in East Harlem. It's located on the east side of 2nd Avenue between 126th and 127th Street. This image shows the garage. This image shows the footprint of the garage, and on it, the footprint of the Harlem African Burial Ground. That's the trapezoidal sort of image that's superimposed on the footprint of the garage. The burial ground has 18,000 square feet of lot area. Most of it is within the footprint of the garage, but there's a small portion of it that's within the bed of 126th Street. This is an illustrative ground floor plan. You can see the uses that are proposed for the ground floor. Residential will be placed on top of what you see here. And you can see in the green the 18,000 square foot African burial ground memorial, which would be open to the sky. On September 8th, the Land Use Committee of the City Council, by a vote of 18 in favor, none opposed, and none abstaining, voted to approve and modify the disposition and zoning text amendment applications. For the requested disposition action, the disposition is restricted to require a minimum of 18,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space to be located to the maximum extent feasible within the historic footprint of the Harlem African Burial Ground on the project site. For the requested zoning text amendment, the MIH map is modified to allow only option 1 and deep affordability. As approved, there was option 1 and option 2. The council is modifying it for option 1 and deep affordability. Nothing else was modified by the council. Upon review, the city council proposed modification raises no land use or environmental issues requiring further review.
Questions from commissioners? If not, I would request an assent by a show of hands to sending a letter to the council saying that the modification is within scope. Done. Thank you.
Thank you.
In addition to the hearing on Tuesday, September 19th, staff have prepared favorable resolutions for the following items. We have the Pfizer sites rezoning, a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Brooklyn. The Warren Street Center for Children, an acquisition of a building for continued use as a daycare center.
The one thing that I would just note here is that I had previously spoken with the DCAS commissioner about the work that the urban design team is doing. I had the good fortune to meet with the DTFA commissioner as well, and she also was quite welcoming and looking forward to working with our team, noting that it was nice to be able to tap into our agency's expertise.
The Tillery and Prince Street rezoning, zoning map and zoning text amendments. The Linden Boulevard rezoning, zoning map and zoning text amendments. 930 Flushing Avenue, an acquisition of a building for storage and backup by the Office of Emergency Management. All My Children Daycare and Nursery 11, an acquisition by ACS of a facility for continued use as a daycare. 661 8th Avenue signage text amendment, a text amendment in the special Midtown District. The NYPD Property Clerk Warehouse Consolidation and acquisition by NYPD of a facility for storage. The following are actions on Staten Island that are scheduled for a vote on Tuesday. 500 King Street, subdivision and school seat certifications. I will note that 7088 Amboy Road and Ridgewood and Getz Avenues are being laid over. 116, 122 Brighton Street, subdivision and school seat certifications. And Billings Street, subdivision and school seat certifications. On to October, the next item. For the East Harlem neighborhood rezoning post-hearing follow-up, we have Calvin Brown and Eric Olson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So first, as a recap, I'd like to, at the last post-hearing follow-up, we discussed our rezoning boundaries and how we establish those boundaries, outlining our analysis, our block-by-block sort of assessment to determine where there was sufficient opportunities to justify us taking actions. We also talked about the reasonable worst-case development scenario approach taken in East Harlem and discussed the neighborhood-related factors that went into us developing this analysis, analysis framework. And as a result of our sound and consistent planning approach, our proposal in some areas differed from what the community planned presented. However, today, we will discuss heights and densities that the department think are appropriate in East Harlem. And what we want to emphasize is that the basis of our proposal is not solely about heights of buildings, 10 FAR versus 9 FAR. It's about what is the appropriate built form to address all the concerns that we heard throughout the process, the need for additional housing, the need for activating ground floor streetscape, and what impact does this rezoning may have on neighborhood character. And what we want to stress is that the department, factoring these concerns, have created a framework that is flexible enough to deal with two realities, East Harlem today and the future of East Harlem. Building forms that are flexible enough to fit within the built context with minimum impact to adjacent buildings, creating predictability and variation in streetscape. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Olson, who will elaborate on this process that we took to create this sort of sound that's based on sound plan and rationale for the recommendations that we're going to present to the commission today about heights and density in East Harlem.
Thanks, Calvin. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Madam Chair. So we've spoken to you at recent review sessions to explain the zoning and land use recommendations in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. Recall that the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan was created through a community-driven effort led by the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan Steering Committee. So here's a quick summary slide of those recommendations, which we've also explained in recent presentations. I'll now give a quick refresher on how our plan aligns with the community's recommendations. You can see quickly on the slide here that there's a large amount of overlap between our goals and the goals that the steering committee developed throughout their process. As we continue with the presentation, just keep in mind that when I talk about achieving the goals of the rezoning, we are really talking about a set of goals shared by both the steering committee and the city. You've seen these two maps before. The steering committee's plan is shown on the left of the slide, and the DCP rezoning proposal is shown on the right. As you can see on these two maps, we also took an incredibly similar approach in our recommendations to realize these shared goals. At the last review session, we took an in-depth look at the rationale for the boundaries of where the proposed actions would apply, so I won't spend too much time on that topic today. In general, though, many of the differences between the two proposals are a result of translating the steering committee's more general recommendations into a fully detailed and developed zoning proposal. In many ways, we brought the community's vision into an actionable reality. Of course, there are areas where our proposal differed from the community's plan. I'll now discuss those areas where we use the community's plan as more of a foundation than a roadmap, and I'll quickly review how our proposal compares to the steering committee's recommendations. So looking closely at Park Avenue, I will quickly review this for you. You can see that we adopted many of the steering committee's recommendations regarding a transit-oriented density approach, mixed-use districts that can provide both affordable housing through MIH and spaces for jobs, and sculpted building envelopes that relate to the viaduct. The steering committee suggested a slightly lower density in the transit node at 125th Street. They proposed 10 FAR. We proposed 12 FAR districts in that area. They also suggested the higher density proposed at that node be limited to a smaller geography than we had proposed. With respect to 3rd Avenue, again, we adopted many of the recommendations in the community's plan. We proposed MIH throughout the corridor, enhanced commercial regulations, and again, a transit-oriented approach to density. The steering committee recommended lower density R9 districts on 3rd Avenue south of 122nd Street, while we suggested R10 equivalent districts. We'll come back to 3rd Avenue later in the presentation, as we know we heard a lot of testimony regarding the height and density proposed along the corridor. On 2nd Avenue, we're proposing many elements that are nearly identical to the steering committee's recommendations. We proposed R9 districts throughout the corridor, which include MIH. Our proposed actions also anticipate future 2nd Avenue subway stations by encouraging subway infrastructure to locate within mixed-use buildings and discouraging standalone subway infrastructure that can have a deadening effect on the streetscape. You can see an image of what that looks like here on the slide in the bottom right corner. And here in the red box with the neighborhood plan logo, you can see just how similar our proposal is to the community's recommendations. We did, however, opt for a lower density than the community plan, closer to 125th Street on 2nd Avenue, due to changes in the planned location of the terminus of the 2nd Avenue subway. So on this slide, you can see the combined package of zoning map amendments that were included in the certified proposal. Remember that for nearly every other portion of the study area, including preservation districts, Lexington Avenue, and 116th Street, we proposed what was in the steering committee's plan nearly exactly. In certain areas, we opted for lower densities, actually, than what were recommended in the community's plan. We think this is a more nuanced approach and that it brings a desirable balance to the plan while ensuring that the purpose and need for the proposed actions is fully addressed. So when we originally brought this to the commission back in April, when the project was certified into public review, the proposal contained height limits in many areas of the neighborhood. So here's a map that depicts the maximum height limitations in the proposal as it was originally certified. I'll quickly review where these height limits were mapped in the original proposal. Proposed contextual districts, which are called out in the slide here with the orange arrows, as you can see, contain height limits of either 7 stories or 8 stories. Proposed R7D contextual districts on Lexington Avenue and East 116th Street contain a maximum permitted height of about 11 stories. Mixed-use districts proposed along Park Avenue also contain height limits. These height limits were designed to allow the maximum permitted density to be utilized within the zoning envelope. With such a wide range of uses allowed, a good amount of height flexibility is needed to make these districts work for their intended purpose. Proposed M16 R9 districts contain a height limit of 285 feet, or about 28 stories. Proposed M16 R10 districts contain about 35-story height limit, or 350 feet. We also proposed many districts that did not contain height limits. These include the C64 and C46 commercial districts and standard R10 and R9 residential districts. So for further clarity, here's a map that shows the densities that correspond to the various zoning districts included in the certified proposal. Higher densities were proposed in the areas with the most direct opportunity to meet our goals, shown here in the 2 shades of purple. This accomplishes a variety of objectives, our density approach here, each directly related to our shared goals with the steering committee. It targets preservation strategies in the most appropriate areas. It maximizes opportunities to create affordable housing through the MIH program. It responds to existing and future transit nodes and proposes density in the areas that can handle it. And it includes higher non-residential densities in the areas where we are hoping to create more spaces for jobs and economic development. The orange areas show where we proposed lower density districts. In many cases, these FARs are actually lower than what was recommended by the steering committee. When viewed as a larger package, the orange and purple areas really establish an appropriate balance of densities in the neighborhood with a strong spatial relationship to areas rich in transit access. Beyond just density, though, I just want to talk a bit about the zoning envelopes that we proposed as well. Beyond density, really the way that the buildings are shaped through these zoning envelopes can also help support many of our goals. So I'm going to go off on a quick tangent here just to make a point about the importance of the ability to choose between multiple zoning envelopes, notably contextual and tower on a base zoning envelopes, which would be applicable in all of the areas where we propose these higher densities. We feel that this optionality allows for a more varied streetscape and a better urban design outcome on the whole. The growth corridors on our proposal, the areas in the darker purple, generally allow for both contextual and tower on a base building forms. Developers could choose either option depending on specific site conditions and their proposed building program. We think the result will be a mixture of lower contextual buildings on some sites and larger tower buildings on other lots. Allowing this optionality is critical for a number of reasons. The tower on a base envelope allows for a taller tower and also contains minimum and maximum base height requirements to ensure some consistency in the street wall. This allows for more varied urban form with taller, more graceful buildings and fewer shadows along the sidewalks. In addition, the tower envelope can result in better preservation outcomes as well, as it allows some existing buildings to remain while their unused floor area is relocated to the tower. In the contextual envelope, as we know, there is of course a height limit. If applied uniformly up and down a corridor, this results in more uniform and a monotonous streetscape, with shorter, more squat buildings due to the height restrictions. Contextual height caps can limit design flexibility, and they often result in a very similar building type because there are limited ways to utilize the full permitted floor area. Contextual envelopes can also have the unintended consequence of encouraging demolitions, as they do not easily accommodate floor area transfers on merged lot development sites. Again, we believe that allowing for both building forms is appropriate and important for East Harlem. So you've seen this image in our previous presentations, but I want to talk a bit about the existing built context in East Harlem, particularly through the lens of height. As you can see, there is a wide range of building form in the neighborhood, ranging from lower scale areas to other areas with much taller buildings and a different built context. Some of these areas are perfectly suited to a more preservation-oriented approach, while others are defined by tower-like building forms with significant height. There are nearly as many areas in East Harlem adjacent to tall buildings in the 25 to 35 story range as there are lower density areas where preservation districts may be appropriate. So next, I want to give a quick summary of existing conditions in the areas where our recommendations were not the exact same as those in the community's plan. We'll begin with Park Avenue. So again, we're looking through the lens of height here and how existing buildings influence the built context on major corridors. Here we can see that there are numerous tall buildings that exist today in close proximity to Park Avenue, many of which contain tower-like building forms. On the left, you can see an image of 5th on the Park, which rises to about 32 stories, less than 2 blocks away from Park Avenue. On the right side of the slide, you can see the Miles, a 28-story tower fronting on Lexington Avenue. As is evident here, existing buildings in this area already rise to the 28 to 32-story range. Here are a few developments further south in the western portion of the study area. The NYCHA campuses between 112th and 115th Street contain several tower-like buildings of up to 19 stories. I don't know if we have to change the color scheme. The Heritage, which you can see on the left, is a residential tower that contains 2 separate towers, actually, that each rise to about 33 stories. So moving east to 3rd Avenue, you can see that 3rd Avenue lies between 2 of the taller buildings in the area, the Miles, which we just described, and Taino Towers. Taino Towers contains 4 separate towers that each rise to a height of 35 stories, making it one of the most notable physical presences in the neighborhood. Similar to Park Avenue, you can see that there are already buildings along or near 3rd within the 28 to 35 story range. Further to the south, again, we see several towers in the NYCHA campuses between 112th and 115th Streets. And further to the south, even further to the south, is Franklin Plaza, which contains buildings in the 20 to 22 story range. On 2nd Avenue, the existing height context is framed by many of these same buildings. Again, we have the... Oops. So again, we have the iconic Taino Towers and the tower-style building forms on the NYCHA campuses. Further to the south, there are the higher density towers in the Franklin Plaza complex, again, that rise up to 22 stories. And to the east of 2nd Avenue, there are 4 separate towers in the 1199 houses complex that rise to about 30 stories each. While there are some areas of East Harlem with a low-scale built context, we really just wanted to highlight that existing building heights in the neighborhood are highly varied. That being said, we have been listening closely to many of the comments we received during the public review process. We heard that many folks had strong concerns about the height and scale of buildings that could be produced through the rezoning, that super tall towers could start marching up and down 3rd Ave into East Harlem. So as we explained previously, DCP put forth an ATEX application in response to these exact concerns. While our certified proposal did not include height limits in some areas, the ATEX placed height limits of between 17 and 21 stories into scope throughout the study area for consideration by the Commission. We've specified those heights to be responsive to what we heard during public review, that the speaker and others wanted a full range of options on the table for discussion. While our ATEX brings 17 to 20 story heights into scope throughout the study area for consideration we do not believe that these are the appropriate building heights to adopt for East Harlem. On the slide, you can again see the areas of the rezoning area where height limits were not included in the originally certified proposal. As we've explained previously, based on our site-by-site analysis, we would not expect any buildings within the proposed upzoning areas to rise any taller than 35 stories. We would actually expect almost all of the buildings to remain close to 25 stories or under. We think that 20 to 30-story buildings are entirely appropriate along these avenues. That being said, we completely understand that without a height limit on paper, again, there can really be fears that zoning would result in these 40-plus story towers up and down the avenues. So now, we are now proposing modifications to the commission for the first time that would establish height limits in most areas where they were not originally proposed. All of the height limits that were originally proposed, as I described earlier, we did originally certify some height limits, those would remain as they were in the certified proposal. The new height limits would only apply to areas that did not originally have them. We developed this modified height limit proposal to proactively respond to community concerns while still ensuring that the goals of the rezoning can be achieved. So you can see our modified proposal on the screen. First and foremost, we really wanted to ensure that our height proposal would continue to allow the full utilization of floor area available in each of the proposed districts. Each of the zoning districts and densities would remain the same as in the certified proposal. The element that would be changed under this modification is the inclusion of height caps in proposed non-contextual districts along 2nd, 3rd, Lexington, and Park Avenues. We wanted to continue to allow for a wide variety of built form to avoid the monotonous and uniform street walls that I've been explaining. This directly corresponds to our goal to establish urban design controls that allow for a more desirable pedestrian environment. This also relates to our preservation goals, as the availability of non-contextual envelopes can actually be a disincentive to demolitions on merged lot development sites. We also wanted enough nuance in our proposal to ensure that our economic development and infrastructure-related goals could continue to be achieved and would not be inhibited by any of these height limitations. More importantly, though, we felt strongly that the proposed zoning envelopes should accomplish the objective of producing significant and meaningful affordable housing development. Our modified height proposal would establish a maximum height limit of 28 stories or 285 feet in most R9 and R9 equivalent districts. We would expect buildings in these districts to get no taller than the 25 to 28 story range. This cap is based on the height limit in the M16 R9 district, as I explained earlier, which accommodates a wide range of uses while still fitting the full FAR floor area for the 8.5 FAR proposed in these R9 districts. For most R10 and R10 equivalent districts, these modifications would introduce a height limit of 32 stories or 325 feet. We would expect most buildings in these areas to stay well within the 28 to 32 story range. Again, this height limit would continue to allow the full 12 FAR of floor area to be constructed, and it would not inhibit the realization of any of our shared goals with the steering committee. It would also ensure that no buildings on 3rd Avenue are any taller than Taino Towers. In select areas, we actually built in additional flexibility to ensure that economic development and infrastructure-related goals would not be adversely impacted by these height caps. Non-residential uses can necessitate more height flexibility, as these uses tend to require taller floor-to-ceiling heights, and the inclusion of subway infrastructure within mixed-use buildings also can require additional height. So all of the maximum height limits that we've specified here take these variables into full consideration. Thus, we've proposed a more relaxed height limit in the areas where we've proposed minimum non-residential floor area requirements, as well as in areas where future 2nd Avenue subway stations could be located, which corresponds directly with our proposed TA districts. So we think that as a whole, this modified proposal strikes a nice balance, which has really been a primary consideration from the very beginning. These maximum height limits provide some predictability that buildings in the area will not reach the extreme heights of some of the buildings we've seen elsewhere in Manhattan. In short, the caps guarantee that we will not be seeing any super tall buildings in these areas. Our proposed modifications would make height caps effective everywhere where we're proposing an upzoning, with the exception of the C64 district at the Park and 125th Street Transit Hub, which is really the center of where we think our transit node approach should be oriented. Our intent is to clearly respond to community concerns while still offering a planning framework that accomplishes our shared goals with the steering committee, namely affordable housing production through MIH would remain the main priority. our economic development and infrastructure objectives would not be adversely impacted. We can help preserve neighborhood character by providing both zoning envelopes and optionality, and that will also continue to offer the flexibility needed to avoid these less desirable building forms that can make the streetscape a bit monotonous. We think that this modification would maintain the strong planning rationale that has guided the proposal thus far, while including an even more nuanced approach to height that incorporates suggestions that we heard from the community. So that wraps up the description of our proposed modifications to the certified application. Here again is a map of the proposed zoning map amendments in total, which would remain the same in our proposed modifications as under the original proposal. So these districts would not change, and the proposed densities would not change either. So just to finish, this is a recap of the actions that we proposed. Note that the proposed height modifications would be implemented through changes to the newly proposed special district, the East Harlem Corridors Special District. Thank you very much for your time. Calvin and I can now accept some questions if you have any.
Actually, Eric, before questions, if you could go back to your last height map, and if you could indicate the one area where there are not proposed to be height limits, which is also consistent with the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan.
Yes, the steering committee has sort of indicated some comfort with the approach to height that we've taken for the 125th Street area. So the C64 district on these block frontages right there, near that node, does not have a height limit.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Deleuze.
So two questions, maybe clarifications, actually. So the height limits would be, you said, achieved through a special district, not through contextual zoning, essentially.
That's correct. We would maintain the two options. There would still be contextual envelopes available in each of the proposed zoning districts, but in the non-contextual tower on a base envelope, there would be a maximum height.
Okay, and if I may, I want to unpack something you said, which I think is very, very important, which is that you said that contextual zoning limits the ability to have merged lots to achieve more flexible building forms, and that is what leads to demolition. Could you maybe give some examples at the street level of where that consideration played and, led to the ATEX?
So are you talking about specific areas in terms of the context of East Harlem where we thought that that would be the most appropriate? Or
Where that consideration to try to avoid the demolition came into play? Give us an example of how it Yeah, exactly. Give me an example.
So again, I guess I'll focus on 3rd Avenue right now, which we sort of pointed out has a fairly varied built context with some 35-story buildings and some 1 to 2-story buildings as well. There are many block frontages along 3rd Avenue that could be assembled. The entire block frontage could be assembled in its entirety. In these types of situations, with a maximum height limit, with the contextual height limit, I unfortunately don't have visuals that I can sort of walk through right now. However, if there was a maximum height limit, it makes it very difficult to use or to preserve any portion of that particular assemblage in place. So if you're a developer and it made sense just to use half of the block frontage, you would be limited in height in a way that would not allow you to achieve the full FAR that you could unlock on that entire block frontage. Unfortunately, we don't have an image to illustrate this currently, but we're happy to work on one of those and provide it.
And what the community proposed, they proposed the R9A, which has a height cap of 175 feet or 17 stories. So basically, it makes it difficult if you were developing a full frontage to fit all the desired residential FAR in that footprint without having to impact the adjacent properties.
So I think this massing might illustrate kind of what I'm talking about. This massing was created in a district that was originally proposed without a height limit. And so you can see that there is floor area being utilized. Additional floor area then would usually be available on the site, just that particular lot, through the lot merger. In this case, in this sort of hypothetical, it would be a lot merger, taking some of the development rights from this area and using them for the taller tower. So again, this really has the ability to allow some of the existing buildings to remain in place while still accommodating the full floor area available. In this particular example, it's slightly different because this is allowed through the Special Transit Land Use District. The additional height comes from the infrastructure included in the base of the building. Sorry, we don't have a clear example at the moment.
I would just note on this one that the photo at the bottom is the condition to be avoided.
Yeah, no.
Commissioner Levin.
Agreed. I guess I have a kind of a half-baked comment because that's the way my brain's working right now. But the height limits certainly address one of the things that we heard from the community. But isn't the fundamental problem the additional density that you are proposing here? I mean, I think what we heard from the community really is that we shouldn't be laying so much density on these stretches of Park Avenue and Third Avenue, and it's the availability of that extra density that creates the development pressure that we're concerned about. And, you know, putting a hat on it is some solution, but it doesn't change the fact that there's more pressure created by the R10 designation as compared to the R9. So how can you make those of us who are concerned about the secondary displacement pressures here feel less concerned about this new additional density?
You know, again, we really took an approach that wanted, that was oriented towards maximizing the number of affordable housing units that could be created in East Harlem. I think the concerns about secondary displacement are concerns that would be best addressed through the preservation approaches that HPD and all the efforts that HPD has been working on with their housing plan for East Harlem. We, again, feel that the most opportunity to realize those affordable housing goals in the entire study area really lies on Third Avenue. We did develop something that we felt was responsive to the concerns about the, sort of really out-of-scale buildings that still accommodated, the goals, again, that we do share with the steering committee.
Yes, Commissioner Cantor.
Thank you. With regard to the height limitations that you pointed out a little earlier, and looking ahead, they can build as of right now, how high?
Along Third Avenue, they can build 125 feet built.
Okay, and the area you showed that was going to be a special district, what is the anticipated height limit?
32,
So
28 to 32.
In these areas where, most of the proposal lies within a special district, but on the major corridors, Park, Lexington, 3rd, and 2nd, we would institute height caps for R9 equivalent districts generally of 28 stories, and for R10 equivalent districts generally 32 stories.
So 280 to 320.
Yes, 325 or 280.
But today they can build taller than that, or no?
No.
No. Today there's a contextual height cap on 3rd Avenue.
Where
at
I'm
least.
going with my questioning is, are we creating an early on situation where developers are going to go throw plans together and start digging a hole next Tuesday in order to avoid this zoning change?
No.
I don't think so. I think it's safe to say that
Just
the
the
existing height limitations are more restrictive than what we've proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you both.
Thank you.
Good show.
Okay. Moving on, Sarah Elmore is present to answer any questions on Sendero Verde. Okay.
I'm not Sarah, but if there's any questions, I'll relay them to her. She's not here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, on October 4th, staff is present to answer questions on 449 Broadway and 220 Central Park South. Also have Oscar from the Bronx office is here to discuss the Special Harlem Waterfront District in the Bronx.
Yeah, can you discuss? You want to discuss or answer questions? I'm happy to.
There was actually a
yes, there's
letter
a memo.
in the package. I guess it's to answer questions.
And I would just note that the purpose of the letter reflected a discussion about how to deal with the 3 pre-existing developments in a very reasonable way of assuring that we meet the goals of waterfront public access with the reality of developments that are underway.
Questions on that? And then staff is present to answer questions on Edwin's Place. On post-hearing follow-ups, you have a letter in your packet from the applicant regarding 19 East 72nd Street. I believe Stephen Johnson is here from the Manhattan office to answer any questions. Staff is present to answer questions on Escuela Hispania Montessori 2 Child Care Center and All My Children Daycare Center 11. I believe Anthony Grande from the Brooklyn office is here to discuss or answer questions on 723, 733 Myrtle Avenue rezoning.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions, or I can go through, we received the Borough President recommendation following the public hearing, the CPC public hearing, and so it was provided to the commissioners on Friday.
That concludes the public review session. It is now 2:45.
And we'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.